Interesting to see a fan who wrote to Gina Rinehart a letter after the Olympics. So let's talk a little bit about the Olympics. So someone wrote to Gina saying, we put it up on the screen, hello Gina, just penning this letter as a huge thank you for our amazing Olympic athletes. Seeing our athletes thrive in Paris was truly inspiring. Hope, says the letter writer, I hope the karma train stops at your station, knowing that not only the athletes appreciate your generosity, but all the Aussies watching and cheering at home. And that was from a gentleman called Stuart. And Gina Rinehart made some interesting comments, Rita, after the Olympics, talking about the funding, James, and basically saying that, she did a massive, she was basically responsible for the success of our Olympic athletes, but she's saying with too much funding is going into bureaucracies and all the support system rather than the athletes themselves, Rita.
And that's why her support is so crucial and so impactful, and why so many of the athletes and their families thanked her after they performed so wonderfully in Paris, particularly the swimmers, the rowers, a bunch of Olympians, because that money goes directly to them so they can devote themselves to training, to being the best they can be. They don't have to have part-time jobs. They don't have to have full-time jobs. They can actually get the benefit of that. And I think there needs to be more of that across all the Olympic sports, that the taxpayer isn't just funding these bureaucracies, as you mentioned.
Exactly.
We're actually going where it's needed to get the best results.
This is sort of the... just quickly before you, James, I'll just read out what Gina Rinehart said about that. And she was saying that I think we should learn from Europe, where countries have decided to cut the expenditure of the sports bodies and make better use of that funding directed instead to the athletes and the coaches. And she said that Britain was an example of putting athletes and coaches first, directing money accordingly away from the bureaucracy to the athletes and coaches. We, of course, see the gravy train at these places.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing. And this is sort of, I think Gina Rinehart hits on something here, which is kind of the Australian disease. It's not just in sport, it's in an awful lot of things where, all the money winds up going to shovel into sort of these back-scratching bureaucracies and administrative organizations. The way that we do our sport is amazing in this country, and Gina Rinehart is a huge part of the success of our Olympic athletes who, on a per capita basis, took home, I think, almost more medals than just about anybody else. So which is why I think it's important to recognize her in that rather than credit the sort of Soviet Institute of Sport models that we've been using, which don't necessarily get the results that she had.
And I think a lot of the bureaucracy has embarrassed itself in the past week, because we've had multiple very high-profile former athletes who are now part of that bureaucracy, including Kieran Perkins, Anna Mears, coming out and defending this absolutely shambolic breakdancer, Reagan. If they weren't so in that bubble, they would recognise what has happened and recognise defending that, trying to bully Australians into remaining silent and not laughing at that. They would see how absurd that is.
Well, it's
but
also absurd. You had Peter Fitzsimons writing a defence saying... obviously that's absurd. But it's doubly absurd for that bloke because he's an ex-rugby player and he's saying excellence doesn't matter, I'm sorry, guys. Australia prides itself on its elite sports people. We want the best of the best.
We care about participation. We care about having a go. But Olympic level isn't about participation.
We want to be the best.
You send your best to the Olympics.
James.
It's all about
this is not a progressive preschool sports day. We're not giving away participation trophies and everybody, here you go, here's your medal, everybody gets a prize. But it's really funny, Rowan. I'm so glad you mentioned Peter Fitzsimons and his stirring defense of Reagan and this whole sort of elite academic class, the same people who were there for The Voice. It just reminds me of what George Orwell said. We're talking about something silly, breakdancing, but we see this throughout politics. There's this whole group of people who take Orwell's injunction that the first order of the party was not to believe the evidence before your own eyes. That's exactly what we are being told to do with Reagan, as we were told to do with The Voice, as we've been told to do with so many other things.
Absolutely. And I would just add the point, and I do feel sorry for the brilliant athletes, the brilliant Australian athletes. A lot of that Reagan stuff took the deserved emphasis, where the rest of the world should have been going, my God, those Australians are incredible. Did you see what they did in the pool? Did you see what those Australians did? How great they were. The rest of the world was going, ha, 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 Australia, ha, ha, breakdancing. I mean, seriously. And the bureaucrats responsible for that decision, and the bureaucrats who defended that decision, as Rita says, seriously don't belong in the job, particularly the amount of money we pay them to do all the trips. Rita, Swifties for Trump. Apparently we're getting some Taylor Swift fans are out there going Swifties for Trump.
You're the one who's brought this story. I'm not a fan of this.
There you go. Have a listen.
I'm not a fan.
There's a lot of terrorism going on. I guess she had to shut down some shows because of it. And a lot of them are just saying, you know, if Trump was in office, this would have never, ever happened.
Well, Rita, you don't think that? I think it's great. If young people are getting behind Trump, the more the merrier.
No, we don't have the time to argue, but no, thank you. And Taylor Swift is a massive lefty, and we shouldn't care about the opinions of pop stars, let alone their fans.
There you
Is
go.
she even old enough to vote?